Hi, everybody. Welcome to Tuesday. Momo is in my lap. Say hello, Momo. Hello, Momo. Mwah. There we go. I'm going to tie in a few things that have been bugging me and use an article about it's a very newspeak. That's a George Orwell reference. Version sanitized for the Chinese Communist Party about what's going on in gaming in China. That's going to be a jump off point to some stuff that's bothering me about gaming in the West. So if you like the way my weird little mind works on this stuff, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK. Okay, so for people who aren't following gaming news in China, you're forgiven. This very milquetoast headline: new limits give Chinese video gamers whiplash. You'd think, oh, limits? What? Limits don't sound like bans or censorship. Limits is a nice soft word. And their idea of limits are limiting people under 18 to 3 hours of gaming during the week during prescribed times on the weekends. That is not a joke. A few weeks ago, people under 18 under the Chinese Communist Party can now play just 3 hours a week during specific times on weekends, video games. Now, there are workarounds, right? Like everything I say in this article, just fill in. Normally I'd say, don't fill in the blanks of what I say, take what I say. This is an exception. There are workarounds. I'm not going to spend a lot of time babbling about the workarounds. Let's just accept there are workarounds. Yes, you can spoof VPN. Yes, you can trick certain age gate things, but they still bothered to pass a very restrictive law that, among other things, requires special exemptions to be made for 15-year-old would-be esports players. But I'm not going to touch too much on esports. Let's face it, esports is, I say all the time when I do radio up here in Canada, don't encourage your kids to play video games thinking you're going to get an esports player. Most people don't put their child in gymnastics thinking they're going to get the next Simone Biles. That's a tiny portion of the people who play video games. Exceptional players, phenomenal, but let's stay in the realm of reality, right? Most people play for fun. Now, they say it's a complicated relationship in China because of companies like Tencent, because of esports stadiums, because college students can major in gaming and all that stuff. But there's nothing complex about the idea that the increasingly paternalist Chinese Communist Party is basically not just telling kids how many video games they can play, but how many, telling their parents how many hours of video games their kids can play per week. Let's, talk about parental autonomy in this way as well. And, it's interesting how much of a hold China has on people even now. We happen to be getting food at a Thai restaurant the night the Michaels were released from China, the two Canadian citizens held in China on essentially trumped up charges, and then they were released for health reasons after the Huawei executive was given a deferred prosecution agreement by the US. Yep. Chinese face culture is now global. Okay, so the waitress in this Thai restaurant happened to be Chinese. And she looked at the screen that announced the news, looked at us, looked at the screen, looked at us, and she's like, we can still be friends, okay? And I just went, you're not the government. And, she seems super relieved. That is the hold that coming from places with oppressive governments like that has on people. That's just one little microcosm of it. So as much as we may want to kind of her look down our noses and prove Edward Said right about the whole Orientalist thing, this is no joke. This isn't an alien country. This is something that's happened on planet Earth. And if multiple waves of both right wing and left wing culture warriors had their way, US and Canadian governments would be similarly censorious. I mean, it went all the way to the Supreme Court in the US whether or not video games were protected speech. And, there's still attempts in one way or another for, big government intervention in what people do for hobbies in a way that, people talk about the evils of watching too much TV, but there's never talk about actually regulating television the way there have been talks about regulating video games and then, comics before that. And I mean, the Comics Code Authority, we don't have time to get into that. But, this story out of China is a snapshot of what happens when people just, go, oh, it's, to quote Xi Jinping, Mr. Xi's government has increasingly deemed games a superfluous distraction at best and at worst, a societal ill that threatens the cultural and moral guidance of the Chinese Communist Party. Pernicious male power fantasy. No, I added that part. You'll see it's not right there. It's right there. And social media users pointed out that the age of sexual consent is 14 in China. That's now 4 years younger than the age at which people can game without any limits. Things are messed up when we hit the, as we used to joke about, a Methodist, I think great-grandmother of mine, no sex, it may lead to dancing. When you hit that point, where it was no sex, it may lead to playing cards. When you hit that point, something is very wrong and it's covering up for something else. I say this all the time, that if people keep going after video games, you're not addressing the real problems with a culture. And, the Chinese Communist Party state media has called gaming poison and spiritual pollution. I'll show you here. Look, like poison and spiritual pollution. Replace pernicious presumed male power fantasy, right? And so what did they do? They got boot camps, fond of military discipline, because that's better, right? Chinese media accounts of abuses like beatings, electroconvulsive therapy, and solitary confinement, because gaming is just so bad that all these ends justify the means, right? Fortunately, we never got this bad here. However, a lot of people might not know that the PlayStation was banned in China. Now, this is the problem with solving things by banning. What happened when they banned PlayStation consoles in China? I believe it was, I don't remember, the PS2 was in China, but I guess it was a PS3 that they banned. But once consoles and the, high quality AAA games, blockbuster movie style AAA games were not available, the Chinese market became flooded with free-to-play mobile games, which of course have all these, psych tactics to suck as much money out of players as they possibly can, keep people playing longer, create those frustration thresholds, go back to the old coin-op model of get people to keep pumping money into a game that gets harder and harder and harder. So once they put some money in, they'll pump more and more and more money in. If you watched the episode of Boss Fight that dealt with this, there is some reasonable science that says these kind of, loot box style games, it's not like gambling, it is gambling in a great many ways. So that's all that happens when you ban something. Something comes in to fill the available space, and it can be even worse. And this one game dev, they interviewed for this piece. His family name is Shi, but what's his actual name? Stone Shi, or Shi Stone, I guess is more accurate. But he described the way the current government rules are the same way his mother handled video games growing up, and with him, he's a game designer, it completely backfired. He said up here, during weekdays, his PlayStation 2 stayed locked away in a cabinet. Each disc he bought was scrutinized. Plenty of them were deemed inappropriate. When he got to college, he entered a period that he called payback, trying to make up for the years when he had strict limits. Even now, he sometimes indulges his gaming habits or spends more than he should. What's important to understand, he said, is that for a generation that grew up largely without siblings, many with parents who worked late, video games offered a portal to a social world beyond the doldrums of school pressures. After school, I would finish supper alone, and it sounds pathetic, but what made it less pathetic was I had my gaming friends, he said. He recalled that when his parents kept him from playing games, he would go online and watch others play games. And look what he says. Chinese game developer. Banning people from doing something doesn't mean people will do what you want them to do. Can anybody please involve in the culture war, please just put that phrase somewhere, write it down and stick it on your wall. Banning people from doing something doesn't mean people will do what you want them to do. That is the whole issue I have with this culture war approach of there ought to be a law, it should be illegal, people shouldn't be allowed, ban it, ban it, ban it, and both extremes do it. Come on. Anybody who is a full-blown culture warrior is part of an unhealthy extreme. Most people are just caught in the middle. They may have, picky, choosy opinions on a certain subject, but most people would just like things to be more based in facts instead of emotionally charged rhetoric. But here's the thing that just tickled me and why it got me thinking of something else, wait for it, that's going on in games in the West right now. The game designer talks about the fact that, a teacher said that he tries to discourages students from going into esports, for instance. He said, often children's spiritual needs aren't met. It is easy in the virtual world to get a sense of accomplishment, identification, and initiative, but they may not have that in study or in life. The game designer, Mr. Shi, said he'd already noticed children moving to other game-like pastimes. After the ban, he ran into a large number of children at a store examining and painting figurines for the strategy board game Warhammer. Yes, banning video games pushed Chinese kids towards literal heretics. I love it. And this is the reality. This is the reality, is that kids want, and you know what? Adults too. Larger than life, exciting experiences. If you try to starve them of these things, they will find something to scratch that itch, right? To feed that need. And trying to ban it or, corporate censor it away isn't going to change that. They will just find something that scratches that itch. And I bring this into the utter stupidity of the modern audiences euphemism that we've seen infect franchises like Saints Row. like Mortal Kombat. Franchises that were deliberately larger than life and in many ways politically incorrect and over the top violent. But modern audiences aren't interested in that, except for perhaps still the over the top violence. But not any boobs, not anymore. No dildo bats, nothing. Modern audiences, right? And what modern audiences is code for is characters that are avatars for unchallenging mediocrity, right? They have personalities, but not too much. Let's not get crazy, right? Like, there's only one human hair color, two human hair colors allowed that exist in nature in video games right now. Black and brown, right? You know, Aloy in Horizon Zero Dawn and Horizon Forbidden West, she's just a rebel now. Like, oh my God, no one's hair grows that color, right? Yes, we are rare. Fair. We are genetically rare. I get it. I'm a freak. But this grows out of my head this way. Okay, it actually does, including these lighter stripes. Yeah, that's mine too. The fact that even blondes are kind of banished now, and everybody has to be, you know, kind of a slim body type and a little bit like just slightly bottom heavy, and the faces are all constructed. They could be Hispanic, they could be Asian something, maybe they're mixed race. It's up to the interpretation. And then of course the only color in hair has to be, you know, manic panic style, and it must be in a boho cut. You know, the part's got to be all the way like over the fuck here, and this has got to be shaved or like super short. Nothing else is allowed. You are only allowed character creation for a certain number of hours during weekends at specified time. It's the same bloody impulse. Just control everything so nobody gets crazy, you know? And it's frustrating because I don't know of anybody good faith in this debate. Even people who are like hardcore identitarians and believe very much in representation, I don't know of anybody in good faith who wants all the fun sucked out of games because they grew up with, you know, games like Mario. Now, Mario's not allowed to be Charles Martinet anymore. No, he had some character in his voice. Now he has to be Chris fucking Pratt. You know, Anna Taylor-Joy, I'm fine with Princess Peach because I'm actually interested in how that would work. And the guy from Key and Peele is Toad. I'm like stoked for that. But those are people with personalities. Chris Pratt worked in the Lego movie because he looks like a fucking human Lego figure. When you think of, you know, boring, you think Chris Pratt. Chris Pratt is like the default vanilla character that starts up in your character creation thing in an RPG. You know, just boring McWhite guy. And no slight against Chris Pratt. He can't help the way he looks, right? He's makes a lot of money being Hollywood's tofu and Wonder Bread mayonnaise sandwich, right? No slight on him. There's a role to fill. But Mario? But modern audiences, right? Inoffensive. Offensively inoffensive to me, but inoffensive, unchallenging, and bland. Totally in lanes. Don't rock any boats. Don't create any controversy. That's state-run media territory. That is not the creator's impulse. And that may sound like a big swing. Notice I didn't say it is state-run media. I said it's state-run media territory. You know, there's a reason that the Chinese government is cracking down on, you know, these effeminate pop idol guys too, which I'm sorry. Can we please have more so-called effeminate pop idols? I'm good with that. Like, bring that on. What you try to suppress becomes stronger. Beware the might of K-pop stans, right? And it seems so silly, but it's really not, right? The fact that corporations are basically creating similar environments to what openly oppressive state censorship is doing in other parts of the world should be a real wake-up call to us that, you know, there's a way to protest this. I'm doing it logically. I'm not just jumping up and down and stamping my feet. But we gotta start standing up for actual creativity and being prepared for every single one of us to be a little bit offended for the greater good. Because all of us benefited from an era in gaming that was not bubble wrapped. You know, hopefully you're an adult watching this. I don't make content for teenagers. If you are a precocious teenager, welcome. I even worry about, you know, kind of the under 25 set. There is so much anxiety and so much worry and fear and just a fear of being different among people under a certain age. I feel terrible for these young adults who are terrified to make choices because somebody might say they're wrong and then cancel them, right? That's no way to live. And how is that any different than living under an oppressive government regime? In a way, it's worse because you can point out the oppression when it's out there in public. When a government is doing it, you know, China is not even attempting to really hide it anymore. Sorry, the Chinese Communist Party. People are not their governments. But game developers are doing it here too. When you neuter Saints Row for modern audiences, exactly what modern audience are you talking about? The people who grew up sneaking web porn on their cell phones from the age of 16? You know, the young adults, the college age people who just hook up and have casual sex because relationships are too much work. You know, the people reading increasingly out there furry transformation webcomics. Like, sorry guys, exactly who are these modern audiences? It's not the modern audiences that things like the Saints Row franchise and obviously this Mario movie are gearing towards. I don't believe that's actually a real demographic. I think that is the demographic that media companies, not creators, but media companies want to exist because it's bland and middle of the road, and so they won't get into trouble. There is nothing remotely offensive in it. It is like the friggin' growing pains of video games. There was nothing offensive about Growing Pains. And then, you know, Kirk Cameron ended up was that Growing Pains? Or was that Family Ties? Family Ties was the one with Michael J. Fox in it, right? Like, at least that had some sparkle. Friggin' Family Ties was boring milquetoast television. See also The Facts of Life, right? What we need is games like The Golden Girls, which was surprisingly spicy, and a lot of people missed it because it was a show about 4 old ladies. Funny thing is, those women were in their 50s in the show. But, you know, this modern audiences thing, I don't know of any younger person who's like, yeah, please give me boring. You know, saying we want more inclusive media, we want media that reflects more their life experiences, does not mean you have to give them bland and boring. Because, my God, these kids are so anxiety ridden. What the heck is going on in teenagers' lives these days? Like, maybe teenagers need some doses of escapism because their regular lives are just crushing vices of oppression where they're all on these tracks and they all have to do exactly what they're told every hour of the day because they have these parental monitors all over them. Oh, by the way, they're playing Fortnite, which is colorful and customizable. And, you know, they're playing Fall Guys, which is colorful and customizable. And Overwatch never became as big, but colorful. And, you know, you can pick your character and skins. And then you got League of Legends with those skins. The super popular games are bright and colorful and kind of fucked up with silly dances and, you know, being able to basically make your character a random combination of objects you buy from the Epic Games Store. That's what modern audiences actually want. Not a choice of hair colors that go from lightish brown to black. And, you know, a skin tone palette that, you know, is about 4 shades. We had to get away from that for makeup. The character designs in video games now are the way makeup foundations were in like the 80s. There were 4 to 6 colors. They didn't match anybody's actual skin tone, so you had to like combine them with shit. You know, unless you were perfectly olive skinned. Like, if you had the 80s Italian complexion, no offense to Italians, this is just what makeup foundation was designed for, then you were good. Everybody else, no, sorry, no foundation for you. And companies like MAC and things like that broadened it. And it's just gotten so ridiculous that modern audiences just feels like the corporate straitjacket that, you know, you can only play 3 hours of video games during these hours on weekends. The state straitjacket that the Chinese Communist Party is doing. And again, this may seem like hyperbole, but, you know, if the Saints Row game actually turns out to be fun, what was with this trailer? What were they so afraid of that the cast of Scooby-Doo seems edgier than that Saints Row game? You know, they just don't want people freaking out like they did with Thick Thor or fucking Project Eve. And my question is, you know, you look back at the great artists of all time. You know, TV networks wouldn't show Elvis Presley below the waist. You know, Madonna got shut down at some of her concerts at one period during her career. Michael Jackson was controversial. They wouldn't play him on MTV at first, and Michael Jackson is now controversial for other reasons, but that's not what I'm talking about here. But art, even popular art, even, you know, art aimed at teenagers, challenged. It took risks. It wasn't, you know, we think of boy bands as being safe, but boy bands are actually, think about it, they're the first sexual fantasies teenage girls usually have. you know? It's the same thing Baywatch basically was in the 90s. Not that Baywatch was a good show. It wasn't. It just served that particular niche. These human impulses are not going away, and trying to make them go away, especially in an age where we recognize that orientation, identity, and taste are far more diverse than, the powers that be wanted them to be. I will call out something that I don't think is well done. I will call out something I think is legitimately insulting or demeaning to a group of people. Notice I did not say offensive. But I will also defend the right to offend, because no young generation of today, no modern teenager and young adult wants frigging boring. And that's what, a lot of corporate overlords in gaming are trying to sell us, that modern young people want boring. They don't. They don't in China. They don't here. They don't anywhere. Japan recognizes this. The rest of the world needs to get its head out of its collective ass, or individualized asses. I don't care, whatever ass you're into. Really interested in your feedback in this. Very curious. Let's discuss, not freak out and fight. Please. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/LeannaK. Thanks for watching.